Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the March 20th Planning Board meeting for the town of Harpswell. I'm Al LeGros, the chair, and I'd like to quickly go around and introduce members of the planning board that are here.
Lori Rice of Great Island.
Dan Holbeck, Orr's Island.
Amy Heibel, Harpswell.
Christine Donovan Hall, Orr's Island.
I'm Mark Ironman, the town planner.
Okay, at this point, I'd like to ask everybody to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
You have to wait until the break.
Hi, Courtney.
Proceeding. This is like,
Okay.
when you're gonna sit in.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Busting your chops.
we missed somebody. You can
Sorry.
saunter across and
See if
introduce
anybody would
yourself.
bring me my materials.
Okay.
It's all good.
I'm sorry.
All
I
good.
apologize for that.
For what?
We started the meeting and you were out, but.
Well, I figured I'd see if I could maybe keep it fine.
Courtney, what are you looking for?
I brought my bag with my choir folder in it and not my planning board materials and things that I needed.
Oh,
So I thought it might be useful, since I took a lot of notes, if maybe my long-suffering partner would like to drive over here. But he seemed to have trouble finding the right one.
oh, okay. I thought you were looking for something here.
I wish. No, I looked for something here and it was wrong.
Okay, so we have a quorum, and I would invite, if we have to vote on anything, I would like everybody to vote tonight.
Okay.
And we have no old business to discuss. And the rest of this meeting is really, I would classify as a workshop, where we're focusing on a number of things that really would reveal themselves ultimately in ordinance changes or things that would impact the town through the comprehensive plan and so on. So the agenda will be a look at the comprehensive plan draft, and I want to focus on the future land use plan specifically for that particular discussion. We'll talk about ordinance changes, proposed ordinance changes for accessory development, dwelling units, and then proposed ordinance amendments dealing with 2-unit conversions, and then dealing with other administrative issues after that. But let's start with looking at the future land use plan. This is part of the comprehensive plan that's being put together. It's a draft at this point, but it's a fairly comprehensive effort to look at what the town of Harpswell considers to be important at this point in time, and things that they would like to work on to make things better in the future, in the next 10 or 15 years. A critical part of that is the future land use plan, because ultimately, how we deal with development in the town and the way we address issues like housing and open space, conservation, climate change, and so on, really wrap themselves around how we look at the town in total through the future land use plan. So I want to focus on that at this point in time. I would like to invite the town planner to kind of coalesce, discuss some of the things that he thinks are important relative to the comprehensive plan that's been laid out in the future land use plan that we discussed.
let me start by, just so everybody who hasn't been involved in the comprehensive plan process understands sort of what's happening from here on. The Comprehensive Plan Task Force will hold a public hearing on the draft on April 10th, Wednesday, April 10th, at the community school.
Right.
And that's the, if you will, formal opportunity for people to ask questions, make comments about the draft. Before that, there will be 3 workshop informational meetings, one tomorrow in Cundy's Harbor, one at the Orr's Schoolhouse on Saturday,
Right.
and one at the Kellogg Church on Sunday afternoon.
Right.
And those are, I'm going to call them informal, in the sense that they're not part of the official process. They haven't been noticed as public hearings, what have you. Following the April 10th public hearing, the Comprehensive Plan Task Force will then decide how it wants to proceed toward moving the draft of the comprehensive plan toward a, I'm going to call it potential special town meeting in May, or to be an item on a town meeting, a special town meeting in May, at a date still to be determined. There is time built into the schedule that would allow the task force to propose revisions to the draft. And if they did that, they would have to hold a second public hearing, but that only requires short-term notice. It doesn't require the 30-day notice. And then, if the item is going to go to the special town meeting, then the final version has to be wrapped up and presented to be voted on at town meeting. And so I guess at this point, it's an iterative process. I'm going to back up a little bit from what Al said. The draft of the comprehensive plan identifies 3 key issues that the task force identified. The issue of land use and future development, the issue of affordable housing, which has morphed into attainable housing, and the issue of groundwater and the issues related to that. The topic that is most, I guess, relevant to the planning board function, and in fact, in many communities, the planning board is formally charged with having to review the comprehensive plan draft and make a recommendation to the legislative body. That's not the case in Harpswell, is the future land use plan. And I would describe the future land use plan as a generalized future zoning map and specifications of the zones that would go with it. And that's an important issue because state law says that a local zoning ordinance has to be consistent with an adopted comprehensive plan. So if the comprehensive plan is adopted, the future land use plan becomes a guide for revising the zoning, and in this case, the focus of the land use plan and any changes would be entirely or almost entirely within what's now called the interior district, subject to the basic land use ordinance. The plan does not propose any, I don't think, Al, any significant changes in the shoreland. I think it does
No.
talk about that the town should go back and review things and review the shoreland zoning. What the proposed plan does is it proposes taking what is now the interior district in the basic land use ordinance and dividing that up into 3 districts.
Yeah, I think that's 3.
That was
would
hard to
ha-
follow. That was a little bit hard to follow.
Yeah, into, which would have different development standards. As Amy would say, the current interior district really isn't zoning. Any use is allowed in the interior district at the present time, and the only essentially oversight of what happens there is the minimum lot size provisions, 40,000, 80,000, non-subdivision, subdivision, site plan review for commercial uses, but otherwise, if you own a lot and you want to put a machine shop on it, you can do that as long as you can get site plan approval and meet the setbacks and what have you. So the ordinance provides for dividing the current interior district into a number of districts with somewhat different land use standards. And can I hold yours up
Yeah.
while I'm doing it?
Yeah.
What is in here is for each of those proposed districts are in outline form what kinds of land uses would be allowed there, what the density, lot size requirements would be, and what the other standard should be. And if you read through them, you'll see in some it says, subject to architectural design standards for, ha, Uber Eats, you brought supper for us.
Thank God.
And so that's in there for each of them. What the plan, and I really wasn't involved directly in that process, and Al and Amy can probably better speak to it, does is it tries to think about that there are different existing development patterns in different areas, and how those existing development patterns might be better reflected in future zoning. I think as an outsider to the process of setting up the issues, I think there have been some questions about, do we make big color maps?
There's one. In the back.
I have one big, yeah, I have a big
Oh,
one.
yeah,
really
if you
bad.
got a color map.
I have a color map.
And this is sort of the,
Where'd you get that?
I got it from, Margaret made a copy for me.
Oh, okay.
they were out here. Didn't you get?
Not the big ones.
Not the big ones.
Just a little one.
Well, here, you can have my big
No,
one.
that's okay.
Wait,
I don't need it.
Chairman.
No, I'm good. I'm good. I'm good.
I thought we put one out for everybody. There was a lot of discussion about the areas that are shown in the pale yellow, mixed-use district, about whether those really, one, at sort of a high level, whether they made sense. They've sort of were moved around, changed in configuration, and whether they make sense and what's there. The orange areas attempt to create different development standards for Bailey Island, the lower end of Orr's Island, Cundy's Harbor, where there's dense pattern of development, a lot of waterfront-related uses. And then the, I don't know what you call it, rose color. I guess it actually divides it into four, which are pretty much developed areas with a large number of properties that don't meet the current 40,000 square foot minimum lot size requirement. The one area that's in here that is relatively, I'm going to call it controversial in the discussions, has been the use of bedroom density versus dwelling unit density. That idea kind of morphed from the attainable housing discussion, where there was concern, and one of the amendments that's proposed tonight is that if you want to do 2 one-bedroom apartments, you need 80,000 square feet of lot area. If you want to do 2 4-bedroom houses, you need 80,000 square feet of lot area, and that's a deterrent. That got morphed into being applied more broadly in the overall density lot area provisions.
I saw that.
And I think there have been questions raised, and some legitimate questions about whether that makes sense doing that or not. Obviously, if you're talking about attainable housing where there are restrictions on affordability, the chance that things are going to change or whatever in terms of number of bedrooms is probably fairly limited, and you're giving up something if you're talking about somebody building a house out on, you know, an acre or acre and a half lot. You know, they may do a lot that's sized for 3 bedrooms and then decide they want to add a 4th bedroom, but they can't because it's non-conforming. Under dwelling units, you could. Under the bedroom density, if you know, didn't allow for it, that could be an issue. So that's out there. I mean, I'm going to say I have been a proponent of using bedroom density as it relates to attainable housing. I think the current dwelling unit, you know, lot area for dwelling unit provision is a significant discouragement to anybody that wants to try to do anything other than a single-family home. But I think there are questions about how it could be used, should it be used townwide? And I say that, you know, I think that's out there, and I think that's something that as the task force goes forward need to be discussed. The other issue I think that's involved in here is how that bedroom density provision translates into what you can do on a lot, or the size of a lot. And I think as a general statement, the bedroom density approach would allow small houses to be built on lots that are smaller than are currently required. Someone wants to do a one-bedroom cottage or whatever, they would not need as large a lot as they currently do. And in some cases, let me back up. A key piece of the future land use plan is that the different lot sizes for subdivision versus non-subdivision lots is eliminated. It treats everything the same. And depending upon which of the 4 proposed zones you're in, you could be required to have a larger lot than you do now if it's a non-subdivision lot. And you sort of have to go through and do the math to figure out, in a particular situation, can you have smaller lots than you currently do, or would you be required to have a larger lot than you're currently required to?
Okay.
How's that?
Yeah. Thank you for that. Let me provide a couple of comments from my perspective to provide some context. First of all,
I got one in.
what we heard through the process of comprehensive planning was that the town needed greater diversity and availability of housing. So that's sort of a broad statement, but the question is, how do you do that while maintaining what we have here and a lot of the reasons why people come here, which is rural character, space, peace, quiet, so on and so, whatever you want to say. But there is, based on what we've heard over the last 2 years, in a variety of different forums, the comprehensive plan has heard we need more opportunity to build smaller houses, smaller lots in various areas. So, what the comprehensive plan has done is carve out, first of all, a couple of areas to begin with, which are town-owned areas, Doughty Point Road, off of Doughty Point Road, and off of Mitchell Field. Those are town-owned properties. And the reason those were carved out was because the cost of a developer coming in there would be mitigated, if you will, by the fact that the town owns the land. And the property itself would be, therefore, go for a lot less, if you will, than it would be on the open market. And that would allow people to build houses with less investment and so on and so forth. So that's point number one that I'd like to make. Point number two is that in my experience as on this planning board and so on, going on and looking at various subdivisions and so on and so forth, we really have not done, in my opinion, a good job in really holding the developer's feet to the fire, if you will, to be creative on how the properties would be developed. I mean, developers come in here, they want to make money, they want to have, and to make maximum money, big lots, big houses, and so on and so forth. And our ordinances have encouraged that to a certain degree, because you need 80,000 square feet for a subdivision lot, 40,000 square feet for an individual lot. And those are pretty good-sized lots in and of themselves, and they sort of, it gravitates, if you will, or forces a developer to come in and say, I'm gonna build a 3,000 or 4,000 square foot house on this 80,000 square foot lot, and so on.
Right.
Example, Quahog Farm.
Yeah.
So, but on the other hand, we have not really insisted that developers become creative in terms of how to mix in smaller sized houses and lots while maintaining open space on those large properties. And these are oftentimes dozens of acres of size of properties. And so, to a certain extent, I feel like, gee, maybe we haven't really done a lot in terms of insisting that developers become more creative in terms of how we can develop these lots in a way that would maintain open space and allow for more diversity in housing. And so I think there's a lot of room for improvement here. But on the other hand, I want to make sure that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, if you will. I mean, people come to this town for certain reasons, and one of them is, as I said before, rural character, open space, peace, quiet, so on and so forth. I think there's a midpoint that we can strike, and hopefully that we can strike through this comprehensive plan process, where we can allow more diversity in housing, smaller lots, smaller houses in certain areas of the town that would help. We're not going to solve, attainable housing in Harpswell or affordable housing, for sure. But we can add to the process. But I think there's a way that we can kind of blend the best of both worlds, if you will, if we look at how to develop these areas properly. And so what I see with the comprehensive plan is an effort to minimize roadblocks to developing a variety of housing in the town. Now, my last point is this. We've had on the books in our ordinance for almost 20 years, workforce housing, or a workforce housing ordinance, which says that for workforce housing, we can use lots of 20,000 square feet. We have one area in the town that has been developed as workforce housing, and that's Hamilton Place. It has nothing has happened after Hamilton Place between, 10, 15 years and now. Why? Because the cost of land in Harpswell is expensive. And the market value of that land is a driving factor in how things are developed in the town. So.
Al, I don't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah,
but
go ahead.
That's a really simplistic answer.
Okay.
It's not just the cost of land in this town. There was a significant federal, state government infusion of money into that development. It's
Good.
not just the cost of land.
Okay.
It's also the fact that there are few dollars out there, and the fact that we don't have any public water and sewer. So
Good points.
I don't, I just want to caution you against being simplistic.
Okay, good point. I guess my bottom line is that this is a difficult issue and something that the planning board is going to have to grapple with in the future. The town is going to have to grapple with in the future. And even the Affordable Attainable Housing Working Group has admitted that all we can do is kind of nibble at the edges of this
Yep.
issue.
Do the best we can.
We can contribute to the best that we can. So, what we have before you in this future land use plan for the comprehensive plan are a number of suggestions to make development of smaller houses on smaller lots possible in the town. And it's not saying that's gonna happen, it's not saying that it has to happen, but to the extent that we can make it possible, and, you know, I think from a planning perspective, that's a good way to look into the future. And, you know, I welcome everybody else to comment on this.
What I see as a real restriction with Harpswell is just plain water. We
Yeah.
don't have infrastructure for that. It's bedrock, so putting it in is cost prohibitive. Some places have more water and some have less. It's not uniform, it's not fair, but nature's not fair on this one.
Yeah, right.
So where there's open land that we might be able to do a little bit more density, you know, what if there's not enough water there to do it?
Yeah.
And Mitchell Field, considering what used to be there, I would really want some water quality testing to make sure. Military does not leave good history for pristine land use, and to have that contaminated would be a big problem to tackle if we're gonna be building there.
Right.
I'm assuming that in the FLUP, when we're talking about doing any building that's going to be potentially a little bit denser, that we would be looking at the water. I mean, that's obviously everybody's first concern.
Yeah.
Quantity and quality. We can't say, however, that we are not willing to have anything built, because we cannot tell everyone in the world who wants to buy land in Harpswell and build here, sorry, we're not taking any more people. So
No,
we're
but-
not, we can't do that either.
No,
But what we, I think, can and should do as a community is to ask ourselves, what kind of a community do we want in 20 years? Do we want all people who have retired? Do we want some young families? Do we want any diversity in housing and in residents? People who live here. The people, it's great that people come here because they think it's beautiful. What about people who want to come back? Because they're from here and they can't find any place to buy or rent. Can't find anything. And that's not right.
Well, I'm sure it's not right.
It isn't. It's not
just-
fair.
It's reality, but,
Yeah.
whether it's
We
right or
have
wrong.
some, I think we have some control over how we want to shape reality. We can either say, oh, you know, we just won't do anything because we can't fix the problem.
Well, I think that's what we're trying to do with this future land use
Right.
plan, is to put a set of conditions out there that would allow greater diversity, if that's possible. It's not saying it has to happen or it will happen, but put a set of circumstances out there that it would allow it to happen, if things go that particular way.
Obviously, water is, that has to be,
Yeah,
you know, the
water.
water is
but how
paramount.
do you make sure about the water? And I would just draw your recollection to some of the developments that we've taken a look at, especially one on Orr's Island, where they were going to really increase the number of, you know, they were building a subdivision. The
Is that,
residents
is
were
that Bayview?
Yeah,
Is
the
that one?
residents were concerned about water.
Yep.
Yeah, and we asked for some water tests to be done.
Right.
The developer, who was a great guy, really had limited resources and couldn't, he did some tests, but he couldn't really do the quality of tests, the kind of tests that would have cost quite a bit of money to really ensure that people around him wouldn't run out of water.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to take a subdivision lot, which right now is 80,000 square feet in the interior, and if you look on this future land use map, I would say probably 90%, 95% of the town is interior.
Yep.
So we're going to say for subdivisions, lots that are not in subdivision, we're going to reduce them from 40,000 square feet to 30. And then if you're in a subdivision, we're going to reduce that from 80,000 square feet to 20,000 square feet for the first bedroom, and then 10 for each additional bedroom. So I have two questions about that. Number one, we're reducing it by over, 60%? And now we're going to, how do we make sure that those units aren't destroying the water supply for their neighbors? And we could do it, but I want to say, if we do that, the planning board has to be prepared to ask developers, you must spend $50,000 doing a hydrology study. And if you don't do it, you don't get permission to do this. So there will be a cost to the developer to make this happen. And we have to be prepared to say, you're going to have to do this. The second thing I want to say is, so we have 20,000 square feet for the first bedroom in a subdivision. And someone says, gosh, I've just had my third child. I really need another bedroom. How do we enforce? Is that codes or is that planning? If somebody wants to put a third bedroom in to a subdivision that has been approved at 20,000 for the first bedroom, and 50% of the units are one-bedroom units, but now people want to put in a second bedroom or third bedroom, how do we manage that? We are going to have to ask those questions of ourselves. And I want to make really sure, we're looking at 90% plus of what we call the interior. And I am not convinced we have thought this through. I'm just not convinced we've thought it through. The other thing I want to say, the current zoning actually optimizes freedom for the landowner. Because at 40,000 square feet, you can put in a one-bedroom house if that's what you would like to do. You don't have to buy a small lot. You don't have to be constricted that you've only bought a one-bedroom lot. But if we adopt this stuff, then that's actually constricting the freedom of the lot owner.
Wait,
Because
if you buy a
could
40,000 square foot lot, you
No,
can do
no.
anything you want.
No, you might be able to, but if you could only afford at the time a 20,000 square foot lot with one bedroom, but now you would really like to put in a second bedroom and you're told you can't. So I'm just saying the current zoning that at 40,000 square feet actually optimizes the freedom for families. I'm not saying it's cheap, but if you can buy a 40,000 square foot lot, you can build a one-bedroom unit. Then you can add on 2 bedrooms and 3 or 4, as long as your septic system can handle it.
As long as you can afford
It's the
to
planner.
buy that, but not everybody can.
Not everybody can, but I'm saying that optimizes
And
things.
Amy, I would say we are confronted on a weekly basis with people who have a 40,000 square foot lot or a 60,000 square foot lot who say, I would like to build a house for my daughter. And the answer is no, you can't do it.
Well-
Because you need 40,000 square feet per unit.
Well, that's going to be the same whether you build, I mean, I don't know what your point is, because
Well,
my
my
point,
my
you're
point-
actually addressing a different issue, Mark.
Well, no, the issue is there are limits that are created by all the ordinances. We have people all the time who say, my house is located 15 feet from the property line, and my neighbor says it's okay if I build an addition that goes to within 10 feet of the property line. And what do we tell them? You can't do that because you have to have a 25-foot setback.
That's a zoning ordinance, and that's true for every single
And
zoning ordinance.
that's what's gonna be in place for these.
You know, though we do miss one thing, there's a lot of examples of different communities that have tried these exact things. And if you look how they've built, Cape Cod's a prime example. In the 80s, they boomed. They were building a lot of smaller, modest homes on small lots. Cape Cod's not affordable. Go to almost every lake around Maine, Sebago Lake. How deep are those houses stacked on small little lots, modest little homes? They're not affordable.
They're not affordable.
So affordability, the problem is, anytime you get people coming in that have deep pockets, they're gonna change what happens. What drove up the prices the last few years since COVID, it had a lot to do with people coming in from out of state with a lot of money, and they just priced everybody out. You build more affordable homes, they're gonna buy those too.
Well, we would be trying to have attainable homes that would have covenants on them.
Agree.
And those, you could not treat the same way. You couldn't come in with your deep pockets.
Would the
That would be-
covenants last for, is there a?
How long would the covenants last, Mark? I don't know the answer to the
Well,
question.
I think the ones that are in, most of the subdivisions and the ones that are triggered by the state affordable housing law require that the attainability provisions or the affordability provisions have to run for at least 40 years.
Okay, I was thinking 40 or 50, something like
Yeah.
that.
Lori, to your point, look, to your point, so we build on smaller lots. We live in a coastal community. Nitrogen pollution is a major source of pollution in coastal waters. It causes eutrophication of those waters. What is eutrophication? Algal growth. Algal growth steals the oxygen from those waters and prevents lobster hatchlings, clams, and other water inhabitants, shellfish, whatever, from getting the oxygen that they need. Nitrogen is not taken up like phosphorus is with soil particles. It goes right through. If you live
And what's the source of the nitrogen?
septic systems. Septic systems
Exactly.
and lawn fertilizer.
Yeah.
So if you have more dense development, more septic systems, more nitrogen going into the groundwater, which in Harpswell goes straight out, it's not even uptaken by soils. It just goes along the gradient of whatever is underneath, which is oftentimes hard surface, granite surface. It's going to go right out in. And our waters are warming, which makes it even more likely that you'll get nitrogen blooms. So I just want to say, we need to be really careful when we talk about increasing densities. It is not always good for the environment. One thing I also want to say, Al's right. When we took the temperature of what people really thought was important in the town, it was, first thing, for me, I talked to over 100 people at the recycling center. It was rural character. Harpswell's growing too fast. It was potable water. I'm running out of water. I have to import my water. I have now got a saltwater conversion facility in my house that cost me $50,000. I raised my 3 daughters. We all took showers whenever we want to. Now I have to take my laundry into town. Okay? It was that. So rural character, potable water, those were right up there. Did we spend any time on this task force talking about rural character, defining it? I asked 3 times for the committee to have a meeting about what we thought rural character was. No one would allow it. We never talked about it. And if you think I'm mad, I am. I am so frustrated. I'm up to here because we never talked about it. And yet that is something that's so crucial to the town of Harpswell. So crucial. We did not talk about it. So there's groundwater, there's rural character, and the other thing is, developing these, I'm sorry,
You're on a
you should
roll.
join the planning board maybe, but, the other thing is regulating lot size by numbers of bedrooms. There are few communities that have done that in Maine. Gardner has done that, only in areas where there is public water and sewer. Every place I looked that regulates lot size by numbers of bedrooms had public water and sewer where those districts, where that was in place. So I think we need to be pretty darn careful about what we're doing here. And I just don't think this has been thought through. I really don't.
Mary Ann?
Hi, I'm Mary Ann Nave. I didn't plan to talk tonight particularly, except that we had a Conservation Commission meeting today, and guess what came up, which was potable water. And we had quite a long discussion saying, we know that everybody's concerned about potable water. We also know that what makes Harpswell is it's kind of an island. We are going to have septic systems, and we're going to have wells. We cannot stop development, but we can maybe start educating better about what an aquifer like ours is like. And I am not a scientist. I am not sure that we can ever know if I have water here and you don't, because of just the nature of a fractured rock aquifer. What we're going to do, though, is we're going to double down, do more on education about what we started with the water witches last year, how to make the best of keeping the water on your land by keeping vegetation and talking about those nature-based solutions. To Amy's point, if you have good duff and grassy, not grassy so much, but brushy areas, that's going to hold that water that's full of nitrogen on the land longer, allowing the ground to purify it before it goes into the bay.
Not on a 7,500 square foot lot, it's not.
And I guess what I'm saying is, we realize we're going to try and just do a better education job. And it's kind of like you're moving to Harpswell. It's a little bit like if you go to move to the Caribbean, you know you're going to have to get your water from the roof, because that's the nature of that island. I think it's important that we make that more available to people, which we want to start doing. And also, that then allows, we talk about we want more diversity of people and smaller houses. It opens up the opportunity to maybe do something in that direction. We will never know, I don't think, if I have water here, whether you're going to have it next door to me when you drill. I could be wrong, but from everything we get our water from the sky, and the best thing to do is to keep it on your land, to soak into the aquifer. That's all I kind of wanted to mention, and it's something that we're planning on doing going forward.
Yes,
Just
yes,
a
sir.
point of
Yes, sir.
information. If you look at the future land use plan, and you look at all of the sort of sandy, gray colored areas, those are all areas that are designated as rural interior areas.
Right.
In spite of what Amy just said,
Oh, I see.
if you
Okay.
go to page 27 in the future land use plan, rural areas, it says the smallest lot, if you have a one-bedroom house, is 30,000 square feet. If you're in a subdivision, it's 20,000 square feet
For the first bedroom.
For the
For the
first
first
bedroom,
bedroom.
that's the smallest, that's the smallest lot. The smallest lot is not 7,500 square feet.
No,
in
no,
all
I
of
didn't
that
say
area.
that, Mark. I didn't
Yes, you
say
did.
that.
You just
No,
said.
no, if you look under other provisions, on page 27, allow attainable planned housing development to
Right.
replace single-family, two-family, townhouse-style units. So we are looking at townhouse-style units on probably 90% of the town of Harpswell, which is now, most people would consider rural. We would consider this a rural interior lot. We're looking, if you are in an attainable housing plan development, you can have two-family townhouse-style units on 7,500 square feet per bedroom. Now, you do have to set aside 50% as permanent open space. That's great, but I think we will have to be very careful if we do that about what we allow as open space. Do we allow wetlands as open space? Do we allow unbuildable land like steep slopes as open space? This has to be very carefully regulated. So that's what I'm saying. We need to be really, really careful about how we do this.
And the town already has an ordinance that Randall Arendt and I developed that allows flexible lot size development that sets out all of those requirements for cluster open space development.
Yeah,
And what land has to be included in open space, what land can be counted toward the area of the thing. I know Al has taken Randall's book that Amy gave him and came back and said to me, our ordinance for flexible lot sizes is awful similar to what's in Randall's
the
book.
four-step, yeah. the
And I
four-step process.
said, it's
Plagiarism.
there because Randall and I worked on it,
Yeah.
and it's there.
I guess what I keep coming back to is that as a planning board and as, whether it's comprehensive planning or whatever, is it our responsibility to put in place conditions that would allow more diversity of housing under the right circumstances, in the right places, under the right circumstances? Or should we just say, no, we're gonna stay with where we are right now, 40,000 square feet or whatever? And so I guess philosophically, I'm saying, over the last 2 years, what I'm hearing is that people want to see more diversity in housing. How do we make that happen? Well, from a planning perspective, my view is that we set a series or put a series of conditions in where that would be possible if, everything kind of meshes. In other words, it's the right place, we have the right kinds of soils and so on and so forth. And that's not gonna be every place in the interior zone, for sure. And so we're talking about maybe very specific places in the town where that might be possible. But I guess what I keep coming back to is to say, should we as a planning board be sensitive to the fact that maybe, yeah, in certain circumstances, in certain places, that would work. Don't shut it out because, we want to maintain either some open space or rural care. And a lot of those things are already preserved in a number of things that we have in place. So I'm sort of leaning toward, personally, let's, I would support putting things in place that would allow that to happen under certain circumstances, not across the board, because it can't happen in Harpswell.
Al, could you help me out here? We're looking at 90% of, or more, in the interior zone. So how does a subdivision lot going from 80,000 square feet to 20,000 square feet for the first bedroom and 10 for each adjust, so you'd have to, to have a 4-bedroom, four-bedroom, 5-bedroom house? How would that, you say in certain places, so how does, in certain places,
Well, I'm thinking certain,
mesh with 90% of the town in the interior under these provisions here?
okay, certain places
Can I,
might be. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but I don't think you're reading what that says correctly. This says that if you're in a subdivision and you want to build a 3-bedroom house, right? You've got to have 40,000 square feet plus an equivalent amount of open space.
No, Mark, I'm reading it exactly as it says.
Where are we? I'm sorry.
You're going from
Page 27.
80,000 square feet to 40,000 square feet per lot. You're having the required space.
You're sure on the
No,
right spot?
read the last sentence.
Yeah, 'cause
I read
20
the
if you got a
last
3-bedroom
sentence to
house,
say
20
the
plus
total
10 plus
units
10
from
before.
remaining developable land. So you're gonna deduct 50% and set that aside, and the density provision applies to the remaining portion of the land. So, for a subdivision lot, you wind up saying a 3-bedroom home can be on a 40,000 square foot lot. An equivalent amount of area has been set aside as open space.
So actually, what we're looking at is a 3-bedroom house, 20, 30, 40,000 square feet, plus another 40,000 square feet of open space.
That's what I read that to say, if you're in a subdivision. And that's why the numbers are smaller. If you're not in a subdivision, what does it say? If you want to have a 3-bedroom house that's not in a subdivision, you have 30,000, 15 and 15, which by my math says 60,000 square feet for a 3-bedroom house. Currently, in the interior district, you're allowed to have 40,000 square feet. If you want to build a 4-bedroom house in the interior district, what do you have to have? Well, you have to have 75,000 square feet compared to 40,000 square feet now. This does not reduce the lot size for single-family development in the rural district.
I understand what you're saying. I get it.
And so that's a bogus argument. If you want to talk about the affordable housing plan development, currently, the workforce housing provision allows cluster residential affordable housing, workforce housing development, which is really the kind of the equivalent of attainable housing, at 20,000 square feet per unit.
I understand what you're
And so
saying.
the 3-bedroom houses in Hamilton Place now are on a density of 20,000 square feet per dwelling unit. This would require 21,000 square feet for a 3-bedroom home. But the issue, is that if you don't want to build a 3 or 4-bedroom home, or if you want to build a duplex with 1 unit and 2 units, I want to have a 2-unit and a 1 unit, right now, you've got to have 80,000 square feet, which essentially makes that form of development impractical, if not impossible.
And yet, under this, and I understand what you're saying, you would need the same amount of land anyway. So how does this make the land more affordable? If you have to put 50% of the lots, the number of lots that you're building, under open space?
No, the allowed residential development has nothing to do with making it more affordable.
Okay,
What it does do is it says, if you want to build a 2-bedroom house, you can do it on a smaller lot than if you want to build a 5-bedroom house. And if we want to get into the game of
Yeah.
zoning is intended to regulate the externalities of a development. What's the impact on traffic? What's the impact on water and sewer? What's the impact on school enrollment? And you can go down through the list, and every one of those, the general averages are that a 2-bedroom house has less impact than a 4-bedroom house or 5-bedroom house. You go to the ITE trip generation manual, and
I
it's-
get it, I get it.
and so the intention of the provision for attainable housing is simply to try and make the existing workforce housing provision usable. If you read it the way it is now, it doesn't say you need X number of square feet per unit. It says, if you do it and you're gonna have 8 lots and 4 of them are affordable, then you can do 2 more lots, etc. It imposes requirements on those lots in the workforce housing subdivisions about what you can do on your lot that is applied to no other lot in the town.
So I come back to something I asked for probably 2 or 3 months ago, maybe 6, which is, we need to see visuals of what this would look like on the land.
And-
Because when we go to town meeting and
And
we
the
present
Affordable
this,
Housing
no one's
Working
gonna
Group
get it. I would,
is working on those, has drafts of illustrations that have been prepared,
Well, they-
and we're working on them.
yeah.
Okay, I think from our perspective, as a planning board, what we need to be prepared for in the future is to look at development in a much more critical way than we have in the past. We've sort of accepted, we've gone into subdivision developments and say, okay, yeah, we have 20-something acres and, 80,000 square feet, and they've parceled it out, and so on and so forth. I think what we have to encourage in the future is more creative development, the way I would describe it. Ways to allow slightly smaller houses on smaller lots to be a part of subdivisions and not necessarily accept prima facie, if you will. The fact that we're gonna have big, huge lots, big, huge houses, and a road going through the middle of them, thank you very much. And I would say that what I think we ought to focus on is the question of whether we put together a series or a set of circumstances that would allow more flexible development in the future. Not necessarily saying it's gonna happen, because there are a lot of things that are gonna take place that might short-circuit that market and so on and so forth. Yes, sir.
Al, here's what I'm gonna say. People come to the town, and if it's a subdivision, they're required to do a pre-application conference. They do that pre-application conference with me. All of the ones that have come along, that have come to the planning board, I have said, you can lay out the subdivision one of 2 ways. You can have 80,000 square foot minimum lots and roads, or you can have flexible lot size subdivision with smaller lots and a significant set aside of open space. The choice is yours. We look at the lot, and I say, you know, maybe if you did smaller lots and you could do some things, and the developers go away and they come back with 80,000 square foot lot subdivisions.
And
Wait, stop. The most important sentence in here is if you go to the line under subdivision lots that says, require clustering and 50% of the land preserved as open space. It no longer makes it optional under this proposal. It
Got it.
says you gotta do cluster open space development. You no longer have an option. Is that limiting on the landowner? You're damn tootin' it is. But that changes the potential pattern of development. I spent 45 minutes today on a Zoom call with a local professional who does a lot of work in the town, looking at a parcel of land and saying, you're crazy trying to divide this into 80,000 square foot lot subdivision. And his response was, well, that's what the property owners came to us and said they wanted. But now, after we've talked about the parcel and whatever, I'm gonna go back to them with some ideas for a flexible lot subdivision. We will see what happens. But if the property owner says, no, we wanna create, you know, our real estate agent has told us, don't make smaller lots, make 80,000 square foot lots. There's no provision in the ordinance that changes that. That sentence says change that.
Yes, I get that. I do. May I, I don't want to interrupt if anybody
Yeah,
else.
I just had one question really quick.
Go
I
for
don't know
it.
if we can do this or not. I've been reading in the last couple of weeks, Florida's come out with a new nitrogen-reducing septic system. It costs a whole lot more, but can we, without naming like a brand, can we put a requirement for tighter developments they have to put in?
Yes, we
No,
can.
no.
Yes, we can.
That's why I was wondering, I don't know if we can or
Yes,
cannot.
we
No,
can.
we can only alter the state rules if the state approves it.
Okay.
The state for the last 15 years has required peat filters around septic systems in certain soils types, which does exactly that.
The state requires peat filter. So when I was in Brunswick, we required peat filter systems. The state did not.
The
We
state-
did for exactly that reason.
Right, and the
we
state-
were the first community to do that.
Right,
And
and-
we did that. So now that the state is doing it, that
Can we
kind
do
of
it?
answers your question. If it's a state requirement, I would
And
think
that-
that we could piggyback on top of that.
And that essentially mitigates much of the nitrate nitrogen concern.
Not all.
Not all,
and
but
But
it's
it
So
has,
also-
and technology keeps improving. So as it keeps getting better, they're starting to try and address this because
It
they
does.
recognize what the problem is.
It
Yeah,
does.
and we see a significant portion of the units are the mini treatment plant units going in.
Okay, so,
And so, you know, the, I'm gonna call it the old style septic tank, distribution box, leach field.
Right.
You may see that, but in most cases, because of the issue of bedrock and soil conditions, an awful lot of what goes in with the package treatment plants now, which deals with the quality of the discharge.
yeah,
So
but
wait,
we'd have to
can I
be-
ask a clarifying question in that case before you, do you mind? Before
No,
you get to your
no.
next point? So the state has this requirement, so we must have that requirement as well, then. We have this peat.
Well, we don't have it.
Well, why don't we have it?
Because the state has preempted the regulation of the installation of subsurface wastewater disposal systems.
I thought they had that. They
They do.
had it.
The-
Why
the-
am I having a problem here?
All right,
So
the
if they
state
say,
rules-
we have it, they have it, then we should do it. Are we doing it?
Sure.
Okay, that's all I
Because
wanted to
every
know.
septic system has to follow a state prescribed procedure for getting a permit to install a septic system.
And so I think we could probably go and require it for more septic systems than we do,
Right.
than the state does.
Right,
And-
that's what I was
and-
wondering, okay.
And we could require effluent testing every 3 years or 4 years to make sure that the system is still working the way that it was intended to work.
I
I just
agree.
want to say a couple of things here. Number one, if we're going to do this, every potential developer in Harpswell will need to understand that the planning board is going to get a lot tougher, as Al said. It's going to be more expensive to develop in Harpswell because you are not going to be allowed to draw your little piece of development idea on a piece of paper and come and stand up here and say, this is what I'd like to do.
Amy, a subdivision cannot do that.
No, but we're,
A tear down and rebuild can do that.
yes, but we're,
But a subdivision cannot do that.
yes,
A subdivision has to be.
But we are now zoning the entire town. We're not, we're gonna make land use requirements and development requirements for the whole town. This is the interior zone. It's not just shoreland zoning, it's not just subdivisions, it's gonna be the whole town. So everything that is going to have to come under some kind of development review, and it's not going to be the same as it is now.
Oh, I agree with
It's
that.
not, it's just not. So the other thing that I want to say is, with regard to this 50% open space, I get Mark's point that it's required. I want to say one thing. Brunswick did this 30 years ago, and the Brunswick Topsom Land Trust agreed to take this 50% open space and manage it for these subdivisions. One of the worst developments that the Brunswick Topsom Land Trust has is a development where they allowed 50% open space. And they are not happy with it. And we should talk to them about that and why they're not happy with it. I will say that this is not, the requirement is an interesting one, but the reason that developers don't do it, even though Mark tries to get them to do it, is the market doesn't want these kinds of lots. People want and will pay for their own 80,000 square foot development. And so even though it may make more sense for the developer and it may make more sense for us, the buyer is the one that finally makes the ultimate choice.
And so if the town's goal is to assure that the development that occurs in this rural area is what the town wants, you have just made the argument for this proposal.
I have. I have.
Is that if the property owner wants to do 80,000 or 3-acre lots or whatever, they can do it, but they've got to set aside 50% of the open space.
Yes, yes.
And so what you've just done, Amy, is you have made
I
the
agree.
argument
I agree.
for why that
I agree.
provision
I to-
accomplishes exactly what you
I
want to
totally
do.
agree with you about
Okay,
that.
good
And
ideas.
Okay,
the-
so
The
let's,
developable land is going to be
Sir,
really
did somebody
crucial.
else get a
Mr. Chairman.
chance to
No.
talk?
so let's,
Well, that's, I was just gonna say, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
My understanding of tonight's meeting
yeah.
was not for Amy and I to debate the
No.
provisions in there.
It's worth a debate, though.
It was to give the planning board an opportunity to provide feedback to the task force. I had heard that Dan had 18 pages of comments or edits or something like
I
that.
got it down to 15.
I have a few also.
Okay, so,
That's why I wanted my-
And so I don't know how Al wants to
okay,
deal
so,
with
I mean,
recording
we've been
those.
going for a while, but I think this is important,
it's
so
good.
let's have Dan.
Okay, I just have a couple, actually, I only have a couple of things. One of which is that when we're talking about subdivisions and the reasonably acquirable housing, is that like, that's a California term, isn't it?
Reasonably acquirable,
Acquirable?
exactly.
Reasonably acquirable housing, doesn't have the buzzwords. But if you're looking at those where we're setting aside 50% of the land, this is where people are buying a chunk of land and they want to do something major.
Yep.
At that point, it would make sense, particularly considering what Lori was talking about with the concern about water, to have a hydrology overlay requirement on it. That before you get a subdivision approval or you get any sort of cluster development approval, the hydrology report is required.
If you go to the housing section where there are descriptions that go there, every one of those says the first step in the process is to do the groundwater assessment.
But I think that has to be the first thing that people read when they're looking at that.
Yeah,
Yeah, because that's, rural character, is there enough water? So what are we doing for rural character? We're requiring the 50% set aside, so that we don't have McMansion subdivisions. We'll still get them on individual
Lots,
lots.
Yeah.
But for people who want to do a nice subdivision or do any other of that stuff, absolutely, the hydrology is number one. And that's something that kind of gets back to my next question, which is, the only areas where we're talking about specific high-density housing is, there are two places that are outlined, right? One is Mitchell Field, and the other is.
And Daddy Point, correct.
Right. Now, those are properties that are owned by the town.
correct.
Correct.
Is the idea that the town would maintain title to those properties?
The answer to that question is the town would either sell the land or lease it on a long-term lease.
Okay.
In terms of, and the reason for that is that the policy of the town with respect to Mitchell Field has been not to sell the property. So for instance,
But
the
that,
oyster.
Mitchell Field is its own animal.
Right, and Doughty Point is, I think the language that's in there could go either way, but the thing that's important about Doughty Point and Mitchell Field is that the town, to use my expression, gets two bites at the apple.
Okay.
It gets two bites at the apple in that the developer, if it is sold to or leased to a developer, a nonprofit, has to come to terms with the town in terms of what they're gonna use the land for.
Yeah.
And then they have to do the details in terms of the ordinance that's there. I think that's an open question of
Yeah.
lease versus sale.
Yeah, I would think so too.
Yeah.
A lot of places do the long-term lease.
Right.
Yeah.
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 99 years.
But since there are only two places that were identified and both of them are town-owned.
Oh, and that's done specifically.
Yeah.
Well,
That was
I
done on
understand, I
purpose.
understand that, but that's what raises the issue, is that if we want to, on Doughty Point, to encourage that kind of development, that gives us an opportunity to provide incentives, which is kind of what you were talking about earlier. Incentives to reduce the cost of the land or tax breaks or.
Exactly.
Right.
And, you know,
And that's what
I
it's gonna
think
take.
I think the sense of the Affordable Housing Working Group was that anybody who thought about wanting to do attainable housing, or what did you call it in California?
Reasonably acquirable.
yeah.
Yeah, is that any
Big words.
developable piece of property that goes on the market, a developer of affordable housing can't compete against the other interests.
True.
The price that's being paid for raw land simply makes development of affordable housing impractical.
Yeah.
Secondly, there's not a lot of supply of that. And there is at least a rebuttable premise that portions of the Dowdy Point property that the town acquired for one purpose
Yeah.
on the other side of Strawberry Creek where we are. And that portion has sat there for years and years. The portion between Strawberry Creek and Dowdy Point Road is potentially developable. Same thing with the upper corner of Mitchell Field is an area that is potentially developable. It is, some of it was not part of the tank farm. It is the upstream flow of both surface water and groundwater. It's where the previous testing has indicated that the groundwater is not contaminated, either for PFAS or for hydrocarbons and other contaminants. And so it's really the availability of developable land and the cost of it.
Okay, that covers me.
Okay. All right.
Mine were mainly questions of clarity when I was reading this, because I had a little trouble figuring out how the titles fit together. Like page 21, it says recommended districts, but then underneath, it says maintaining existing patterns. I was looking for where,
Yeah, it's
what
confusing.
were the district, I mean, is one of the districts developed areas and then walking waterfront?
Areas.
Yeah.
I
that's-
just
Because
couldn't,
they're bolded.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what I would recommend
Well,
is,
I need a blackboard where, see things that are the same level.
You're right.
First of-
It's
first of all-
confusing. It
Yeah.
is confusing.
first of all, what we
That's
have
why I
here
did
is still a
that.
draft.
And
Okay.
I'm glad to have.
It's confusing, you're right.
Yeah,
It
I
is.
just had
It's
trouble.
still a draft, and this is a work in progress. And so anything that you can contribute to clarify would be appreciated.
I mean, I would be happy to
Yeah.
give time for that. I couldn't understand some of it well enough
Yeah.
to help you clarify it, because I wasn't sure, is the interior zone
Yeah,
now
what I
in
don't want to
districts,
happen,
or?
what I think I don't
just-
want to happen is 10 people
Right, sure.
coming in with,
Change
their
this, yeah.
particular
Yeah, you don't want
impression or
Well,
whatever.
no, I disagree with that.
recommendation.
You do want that.
Well, yeah, I do, but, okay, so then.
I
then
mean, here's what I'm gonna say.
It's up to.
In my
Maybe this is
experience,
not-
what you wanna do as the task force is listen to people's questions and comments.
Right.
And you wanna make a list of all of them.
Right,
And then the task force needs to look at them and say, do we need to do anything about these or not? And in many cases, the answer could very well
Yeah.
be not. But if Courtney submitted an
Okay.
outline for the land use section that says, do this.
If I
and-
understood it well enough, I would be happy to do that. I just was confused. It was like, there's the shoreland zone, there's the interior zone, and then there are recommended districts. And I was thinking, are those recommended districts for shoreland?
No.
Or some of them for
Only
interior? I
interior.
just
It
wasn't,
is confusing, but.
I
yeah,
wasn't
no, it's for
entirely
interior.
okay, to the
sure.
extent that you can clarify that, whatever you, what I was trying to say is, I don't want 5 different editors coming in and
Right.
saying,
Right.
say it this way, because
That would
then
be a
it gets
mess,
confusing.
yeah.
Editors is
Yeah.
one thing.
Yeah,
I mean, I'd be happy to come over and you
Okay.
can explain it to me, and then I would, no, seriously.
okay, fine.
Yeah.
All right.
All right,
I'm sure
so.
the information is good.
So-
It's just that I had trouble following it.
Let me
Probably
wrap,
just me.
let's wrap this up. We've had a good discussion about the future land use plan. Obviously, I think one thing that's clear is that there are still some questions that we need to resolve, to clarify, and people need to understand, this is still at this point a draft.
Yeah,
And that's one of the reasons that we're having meetings over the next several days in various parts of the town, and then a town hearing in April, is to try to pull this all together and say, does everybody feel comfortable with this? And if not, why not? And let's sort it out. So Yes, sir.
Okay, I just want to thank you for bringing this whole thing to the planning board. Because, you know, there's input from a lot of different people, but we have a very, very unique perspective
Yeah.
on this,
Yeah.
dealing with it all the time.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate you
Yeah, I-
bringing it here.
I
Yeah.
think, just a clarification on how to make this sound a little bit better, maybe we should say, currently the interior zone, we have these two zones, we have the shoreline interior.
Right.
Interior is gonna be divided into these districts,
Yeah,
Yep.
right.
you know what I mean, and then everybody would understand.
That's why I wanted a blackboard, you
Yeah.
know, to-
Because I had to read several times,
Yeah,
like,
we have an opportunity to make that,
yeah, that's fine.
I mean, I just handed Amy a,
Would you like this back?
no.
oh,
But that is a very, when you lift it up and you look at it, it's a very impressive document on the surface. But there are a lot of
Yeah,
errors, there are a lot of
yeah.
mistakes, there are a lot of faults with it.
'Cause it's
And
not.
so,
that's right, because it's a draft.
it's a draft.
Exactly. Right,
It's a
exactly.
draft, and also, you know, notwithstanding what I was saying, we went through this as a task force, reviewing it all online, which for me is terrible.
I don't like
We-
online. I
We
like-
never got something like this that
Yeah.
we all sat down and looked at together. It was asked for multiple times, and we never got it. And so,
That's the
and,
limitations of
you know,
virtual.
yours truly and Al went online, as we were asked to do, and made edits, and there was never any confirmation that your edits had actually been taken into
I
consideration.
can confirm that many of my
Yeah.
errors were not.
They
Everybody
weren't,
makes errors,
there was
you know.
never any feedback from the consultant about whether we did this because you suggested. No, nothing like that, which really,
Yeah.
you know,
That's
my
a-
frustration
that's
is.
That's another issue.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I think Amy's observation, from my limited experience with task force, and Judy, is exactly correct. In terms of the informational sessions and the public hearing, I strongly recommend that you use a flip chart or a computer and make lists of all of the comments and all of the questions.
This is the April meeting.
Or even the 3
Yeah,
workshops.
okay,
And compile that.
yeah,
And then go through them and say, we should make a change.
right.
We shouldn't make a change. And that should be made available to the public.
Yeah.
Because that creates the validity that what people are saying is being considered.
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you have to make a change.
Yeah,
But you've heard them.
right.
It's so
And that-
important to be transparent. That is
Right.
called transparency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that you just have to do it. You must be transparent.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Message heard. Okay. Because I want to go through this planning board meeting in an orderly fashion, can we say that we're done with our first discussion here on the future land use plan? And we have a lot of work to do on this and a lot of clarification. I appreciate everybody's comments. Let's move on to, we have a proposed ordinance amendment dealing with accessory dwelling units. And once again, I'll turn to Mark, since he drafted this input, to kind of go through, what I see obviously is we need to make some definitional changes, obviously, but also an understanding of what the accessory dwelling units really
Yeah.
mean in the context of what we
Let
have
me
here.
put it, first of all, what the planning board needs to do tonight relative to these proposals is schedule and hold a public hearing to get public input on
Okay.
them.
So my first question is, would you recommend doing that at the same time we have the public hearing for the comprehensive plan?
Yes.
All right, so
Let's, wait, don't go there yet.
Okay.
We'll go there later.
all right,
What this does, this amendments addresses the sort of the requirements of what's commonly called LD 2003, the State Affordable Housing Law. The town currently allows in the interior district what are called accessory residential units.
Yeah.
That creates a lot of confusion because people say,
I was
oh,
confused.
you don't allow ADUs, when in fact, if you read the definition of what an accessory residential unit is, it's an ADU. So these amendments propose changing the terminology in the town's ordinances from accessory residential units to accessory dwelling units. It then clarifies some things that are sort of, you can read them into the current town rules, but that an accessory dwelling unit can be in the principal structure. It can be added to an existing accessory structure, like if somebody wants to build an apartment over a garage, or in a freestanding unit. That's a requirement of the state law. And then it establishes some standards for ADUs. And it really deals with the different situations. That if you're gonna put it in the principal unit, you essentially have to maintain the residential character. If you're gonna put it in an accessory structure, you can't encroach on setbacks. If you're gonna put it in a freestanding structure, you've gotta meet the setback requirements, whatever. I would say we are in compliance with the state law. This clarifies how we're in compliance with the state law. And it seems that this is one of those things where it needs to go through the ordinance amendment process, but hopefully there aren't any issues. If we schedule this for a public hearing in April, the idea is that it would go to the special town meeting in May. And you all would have a month, if you have any questions or issues about it, to get them to me and we can do it. Okay?
Yep.
Would you like to schedule a public hearing on these proposed amendments for your April meeting?
Yes.
Whenever that April.
Well, it's April 10th.
Sometime in April.
You mean even that date is flexible at this point?
Wait, I
No,
thought-
think the May date is flexible.
No, your regular meeting is
Okay,
the
so
17th.
what I was asking you was.
No, we'll get to that in a minute.
All right,
Whenever you decide to do it.
all
The
right,
second one
all right.
is a provision that comes out of the attainable housing report that would allow an existing single-family home to be divided into two smaller units as long as the number of bedrooms in the two units combined is the same as the one. So if you've got a three-bedroom home and you want to divide it into a two and a one, you can do that. And if you look at, for instance, the sizing of septic systems, the septic systems to serve a two and a one has to be a little bigger than to serve a three. But I think the sense of the attainable housing working group, and Courtney, of course, is on it, is that there are sort of two potential objectives here. There are a number of older folks in Harpswell who own older single-family homes, many with 3, 4, or 5 bedrooms, for which that's their primary asset, and they want to stay in the community, and
And there's
this-
no other place for them to go.
there's no other place
Yeah.
for them to go, and this at least creates the opportunity that the unit could be divided into two units. And unlike an ADU, it doesn't have to be accessory if you got 3,000 square feet, you don't have to make one smaller one, et cetera. And also that it may create some opportunities for smaller rental units. Somebody wants to take a 3-bedroom and convert it into a 2 that they're gonna live in and create a single, bedroom rental unit, could be a viable option. So this might be a way to create some limited opportunities, diversify the housing stock. Again, the request would be to schedule a public hearing for sometime in April, Mr. Chairman, and to do this, and if it looks like it's viable, to then forward it to the select board.
Could they
Okay.
both be done at the same meeting, hopefully?
Well, that's where
Yes,
that's
all
where
of
we're getting
them.
to. It's-
All of them. Now, I'm gonna add to the list.
Yeah.
Oh, wait,
Under-
before,
under-
can we, are we able to discuss either of these now for a minute?
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
while I get
Okay.
some water.
Okay, I have, so that's April 17 would be,
Oh, no, wait on that, because I got 3 more public hearings,
okay, let me
which
just
may
ask,
influence when you want to schedule them.
okay, well, let me ask my question about the accessory dwelling unit.
Yep,
Yep.
11.12F.
yep.
Location of a freestanding structure, blah, 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 shall not be located closer to any road than the existing principal structure.
You can't buy a tiny house and put it in your front yard.
You can buy a tiny house and put it in your backyard?
Yes.
Is that what you're talking about, is a tiny house?
Or a freestanding structure.
750 square feet.
Yeah.
You know, a
Max,
300,
I'd
or
say.
you
That's a
can
tiny
build
house.
a 350 square foot unit and put it in your front yard and,
So basically, what you're talking about is an accessory dwelling unit is a tiny house.
it can be.
It's a
Doesn't
she
have to
shed.
be.
It can be.
It can
What,
be, or it could be
700?
a part of your
Up to-
current structure.
One of the options, Dan, that the state law requires is that an accessory dwelling unit can either be located within the principal unit or an expansion of the principal unit. If you want to take the garage out and make that into a 1-bedroom,
Okay.
for grandma, you can do it. It can be in an existing accessory, or it can be in a freestanding structure.
Okay, so if I have a piece of property that, due to the side yard and backyard setbacks, does not leave room for a 750-foot structure, I cannot put it on the property because it would be located closer to the street.
Right.
Right.
Under this.
Okay,
And I think that was added out of the concern that accommodating accessory dwelling units is a positive, but not to the extent that they, detract from the
become an eyesore.
neighborhood.
Yeah, okay.
Somebody, okay?
So does this negate, isn't there a provision about having, like a mother-in-law apartment, like they would have to live with you, and after you don't have, that person passes away, then you can't have that mother-in-law apartment anymore or something? Wasn't there something in that about that?
Well,
That's shoreland, right?
that's shoreland.
Shoreland.
Okay.
And we actually, well, I'm going to whisper. The town has a provision that says in the shoreland districts, you can have an in-law apartment.
Yeah.
And the key to the accessory dwelling unit concept is it's not considered a dwelling unit for density, for lot area purposes. So if you're on a 30,000 square foot lot, you can add the accessory dwelling unit. What the state shoreland zoning guidelines say, if you're on that 30,000 square foot lot and you're in a 40,000 square foot district, if you want to add an accessory unit, you now have to have 80,000 square feet. You have to meet the requirement. The town has a provision that says you can have an accessory unit in the shoreland area, and you don't have to have additional lot size, but it's limited to occupancy by a relative, by, and the proposal here is not to even mention that.
Okay, because I was.
And the reason is, there have been, I think, one or two people who have done that. And there are administrative issues about what do you do when, you know,
Yeah.
grandma moves
I
to the
know.
nursing home and whatever. But it's there, and if it becomes a public discussion, the DEP will make us take that away,
Okay. And that's just concerning the shoreland, not.
just the shoreline.
Just
Okay,
shoreland.
okay, I'm not-
And so in the interior district, you already can have accessory residential units that operate the same way, except it's not really clear that you can have freestanding units.
Yeah,
Okay?
no, thank you.
All right, Mr. Chairman.
Got one more,
No, I got three more.
Oh, my gosh.
3 more.
Yep, okay.
This is a surprise.
No, I'm sorry about this, but at least one of them you were warned about months ago. And that is, as part of the floodplain
Right.
updating of the flood insurance rate maps and all of that, the town has to repeal its existing floodplain management ordinance and adopt a new floodplain management ordinance that meets the requirements of the state of Maine and through that FEMA's requirements. That does two things. It allows the town to continue to participate in the federal flood insurance program so that when a disaster is declared, like it might be for the January storms, people are eligible to get assistance, or businesses. And second, it allows people to purchase federal flood insurance if they finance a property through any of the federal banking systems. They're required to have federal flood insurance. If it's a private finance deal, cash deal, they don't have to do that or whatever, but there are a fair number of flood insurance policies that exist under the federal program currently. There have been people who have been paid for damages under those. And if the town doesn't adopt a floodplain management ordinance that conforms to the state requirements, we get kicked out of the program. They get a note the following day that their mortgage is now in default because they don't have federal flood insurance, or they don't have flood insurance, and they have so many days to rectify that. What we gave you tonight is probably the final draft, and in a couple of places you'll notice there's still underlining in it. But the town has to hold public hearing on the ordinance, even though the public hearing is sort of a,
Formality.
a formality. But
Yeah.
here's the catch. On the first page, it says that this ordinance is based upon the new flood insurance rate maps. Adopting this ordinance is where the town adopts the new flood insurance maps. The town has made efforts to notify people that the new maps are available. The new maps are available online. You can go online and see them and see how your property is impacted by them. For a fairly large number of properties, there's a significant change in that they go from what's called an A zone, where the flooding is based only on still water elevations, and a little bit of surge consideration to a V zone, which is a velocity zone where wave action and wave run-up is considered, and that raises the base flood elevation that you have to build to. And so that's there. We're still finalizing what this ordinance final language will be with the state. There's not a lot of wiggle room, but we need to hold a public hearing on it. Town's legal counsel says it's got to be the planning board that does it, because under state law, it's considered to be a zoning ordinance because it creates V zones and A zones. And so we would propose, Mr. Chairman, that while we're holding a public hearing on the,
ADU and two-unit.
right, that we also hold at the same meeting a public hearing on the new floodplain management ordinance, so that the comprehensive plan amendment, public hearing would be separate on the 8th, or 10th,
On the
I'm
8th.
sorry, the
I've
10th.
got something in the 10th here.
No, the 10th.
Is there a time for
The
that?
10th?
Is there?
There will, public hearing on the comprehensive plan will be 6 PM.
Thank you.
On the 10th.
That's not,
6
that's
p.m.
not,
Oh,
That's
Frank.
not these,
that's not us.
right.
Right.
Okay,
That's being held by the comprehensive plan task force.
okay.
So the planning board needs to meet and hold public hearings on the floodplain management ordinance and these two others that we just discussed.
Right.
Now, there could be another one, and that's kind of a
Another
work.
ordinance or another meeting?
Another
what?
ordinance, I'm
Thank you.
sorry, that you
Okay.
might have to hold a public hearing on. And that is that there has been discussion about adopting a right to fish ordinance, which would presumably override some of the zoning ordinance provisions. There have been commitments made that that would be considered at the special town meeting. I'm trying to work on finalizing that. If it's determined that it is in effect a zoning ordinance, a land use ordinance, you would need to hold a public hearing on it. If it's not, then it can go to the Board of Selectmen and go to the town meeting without you being involved in it. So we have 3 public hearings, and the question is, when do you want to do those? The board's regular April meeting will be the 17th. At this point, we don't know how many items we will have for the agenda, but we're likely to have at least 2, possibly more. And so the question is, do you want to try and do these public hearings at the same time as the regular planning board meeting, or do you want to do it at a different time? And if so, given the fact that there could be significant interest in the floodplain ordinance, where people start to have questions about what does this mean? If you do it, do you want to do it here, or do you want to do it someplace else?
Oh, boy, those are complicated. I'll open it up. I think that, again, transparency is really important. And one of the things that I think we need to be cognizant of is not rushing things through that people don't have time to take a look at and comment on. So I think if we hold public hearings on things like the right to fish and the floodplain ordinance, we should probably do it with plenty of notice and giving people lots of time.
Yeah, one of the suggestions we have had internally is the possibility of doing the regular meeting on the 17th with applications, and then doing a special meeting possibly on the 24th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To do the public hearings, and providing notice on the floodplain stuff.
Does that still give us enough time before the,
Town meeting?
before the town meeting?
Yeah, I
Yes.
was wondering
Yeah.
about that, because we don't have a date for, do we have a date for the town meeting?
No. And the answer is what the Board of Selectmen have said, that they plan to hold a special town meeting in May because the town has to adopt the floodplain management
Right.
ordinance by June.
On the comprehensive plan, I mean. we
No,
need-
there's no timeline on the comprehensive, no mandatory.
But I thought it was going to be in May, no?
Well, it is. The plan is
Theoretically,
yes,
yeah.
but there's,
That's the goal.
but there's no,
Who knows?
there's no
Parents screwed if they don't do that.
externally imposed deadline. The externally imposed deadline on the floodplain management ordinance says if you don't adopt it by June 20th or June 21st, you're no longer in the program. So
But
what
that
the,
has to be, the public hearing has to be 30 days before,
only for the comprehensive plan.
okay, so
Not
we don't
for
have to be
these.
30, we don't have to meet any timeline for the other.
Well, no, for the zoning ordinance amendments, we have to advertise those twice, once at least 13 days prior to the hearing, and the second, no sooner than 7 days to the time of the hearing. So you have to be prepared to advertise 2 weeks before the meeting, and then, you know, then you can do whatever you want and what have you. So you could meet on,
The 17th, like we usually do.
The 10th, the 17th, and the 24th.
Well, the
or
10th, there's
the, or
already
even the
something.
31st,
Oh, I'm just looking at the public hearing on the comp plan, or the 31st.
on these ordinance amendments.
31st of what? April has no 31st.
No, March.
March.
No,
That
isn't
would be a
April?
Sunday, honey.
No, what's that, what's the first Wednesday in April?
Third,
That would be the 3rd.
The 3rd. You could do it on the 3rd.
doesn't give us much time.
I say
That only gives
No,
us 2 weeks.
no, I'm wrong.
We can't.
No. We're talking about doing the public hearings on the ordinance amendments
My mind
in
just
April.
turned off.
Right?
Yeah.
And the regular meeting would be on the 17th.
Right?
We could do it on the 24th
Right.
or that first Monday in May.
The 5th?
Yeah.
Well, I won't
No,
be
that's
here.
May Day.
I have a funeral, so.
I mean,
Just saying.
I would lean toward doing it on the 24th.
Yeah,
Looking at doing it at a remote site, we've talked about the possibility of doing it at the Orrs Schoolhouse.
I can check.
Yeah.
Let you know.
Yeah, I mean, that's supposed to already be in check, but yes, check. Because
Yeah.
our checker hasn't gotten back to us, as
Okay.
far as I know.
Well,
Yeah,
it really
well-
shouldn't
Margaret's
be any
mother.
later than that, because
Melinda.
if people have
Melinda.
things
Okay.
to add and questions and whatever, you want a couple of weeks, I think, before this mysterious floating special meeting.
Right, and understand, the reason for the floating date is that the select board has said they don't want to box the comp plan task force in, because if the comprehensive plan task force holds a public hearing on the 10th,
Right.
if it makes any changes, it has to hold a second public hearing.
Right.
And so that has to have I think it's 5 or 7 day advertising. So what the select board is saying is, we're committed to holding a special town meeting in May, because that's before the summer people get
Yeah.
here, and,
Yeah.
the summer visitors
set a
and
late
people
date.
get busy.
Yeah.
And so
Set it.
so they don't want to box it in. So originally it was talked about May 11th or something,
Yeah.
but the select board has said if it needs to get moved to the 17th or the
Okay.
23rd or whatever, it
should
doesn't
do
make
that
any
now.
difference to
My
them.
brain is turning off. Can I ask that we get on to dates? Can we
Yeah,
agree on
well,
dates?
I think it makes sense to separate them out because our regular business won't have a huge crowd. Plus, at that meeting, we've got to reorganize.
Oh,
Maybe,
Because Bubba's
Maybe.
gone.
Yeah.
maybe.
What do you mean, maybe?
You go, but the reorganization doesn't occur until the select board appoints new members.
What?
Well, we have one
To stand
new
on.
applicant that I know of. And
Stand high.
I'm hoping that Howard is
Recovered.
recovered back in battery, so.
Well,
Yeah. You mean after Al's gone?
well, I
We
think,
can't
I
do
think
anything
Courtney's
until the-
term is up,
Yep.
and I don't know whether she has reapplied or not. Christi,
My term is up too.
and you have to reapply
Yeah.
and get
I know, I
reappointed.
just got the form.
Right,
Yeah.
and whether the Board of Selectmen will reappoint you or not,
Good point.
we don't know. And so the reorganization
contentious there.
can't occur until they make the appointments, because,
But those those terms,
Those appointments will be made, okay?
the
Yeah.
term doesn't expire until the end of April.
right,
But Al is gone at the end of March.
and you have a vice chair
We have a vice chair.
that says, the vice chair, the rules say that the vice chair takes over if the chair is not available. That's what Amy did when
Right.
Al was on winter vacation or fall vacation or whatever.
I mean, quadruple bypass surgery.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so if Al steps down before the end of April,
yeah.
then Amy would serve. Once the board is filled, then you should elect new officers and go forth.
Yeah.
That's what the rules say. By the way, there is a rules committee
The-
that's supposed to be revising the rules.
Yeah, that's, because that's,
Yeah.
That's a- Yeah.
no
Ongoing
editorializing.
process.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the premise is that the election of officers should occur with the members that are going to serve as the committee,
Right.
not by the,
But there's no,
The exiting members.
yeah, but the fact that we are missing an alternate does not preclude us from continuing to conduct business.
oh, you can conduct business, you have that's,
So we can, okay, so we don't have to wait for somebody to fill Al's shoes before we can reorganize.
well,
I mean, you can conduct business, but,
that's up to you. But technically, there could be 3 different people on the board.
Yeah,
And people who are currently alternates might be full voting members to vote on that. So essentially, you could be in a position where you would only have 2 people plus 2 alternates to vote on the
I
officers,
think I love it.
or maybe
Really
one.
screw this up, couldn't we?
So it's up to you, but Mr. Chairman,
Okay,
sir,
are we set on doing a special meeting on Wednesday, the 24th
Of April.
of April what time? You want to do it at 6:30 or 6?
Regular time.
I'm always,
6:30?
yeah, either one.
6:30, and we'll try and find a larger location just in case?
Yes.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to that effect. Any discussion?
We have to second it first.
Second?
Okay.
Second? All right, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so,
So nothing on the 17th?
Yes, regular meeting.
Oh, that's right.
Regular business
I have-
meeting,
okay,
there's
right.
probably
Got
2
it.
or 3 regular agenda items for
Okay,
it.
okay.
But of course, you never know until next Wednesday.
That's
and
right.
Who
Right.
brings stuff in and who doesn't, and people who show up that you never heard from before.
We're gonna
Okay.
start doing site walks at 3, we're gonna keep them at 2
Yeah.
o'clock.
There you are.
okay, so,
I don't know, that's what I'm asking.
What are you saying?
The site walks.
We don't
I
know.
know they had moved them.
Well,
they were-
again, the site walks would be on Monday,
I'm talking about time.
Time, like 2 or 3.
Well,
Because we
here's-
moved it to 2 because of how late,
we're
early
going
the
into
sun
the
was setting.
springtime, so
what
maybe you
we've
go.
been doing
Al won't be
is we've kind of been working backwards
Okay,
from being done at 4:30 or 5. I think we will probably continue to do that. So we work backwards rather than starting at 2, figuring that people like Laurie, it's easier for members to get here later in the afternoon than coming at 2 o'clock.
yeah, 2 o'clock's like impossible,
Right.
unfortunately.
So we kind of start at, can we be out by the time it's dark?
Gotcha.
Until we got
It's
the,
dark now until like 7 o'clock.
right.
Yeah,
But I think now we would set them up so that we're done by 5 o'clock or
Okay.
whatever and work backwards.
because I would like to get back to seeing, because I miss a lot of very important information
Right.
by not
On
seeing
Yep.
it.
Monday, I thought it was on Thursday.
No, sidewalks are
Used to
Monday.
be.
Monday, yeah.
They haven't been on Thursday,
I had it
Christine,
on-
for about 3 years.
I know.
Monday, a week,
Yeah.
week before
Week before. I never
Yep.
go, so I
planning
want to.
board.
Right.
Actually, it's a week and a
You
half.
should,
We
you
can-
should probably
right.
be on the planning board regular person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I should go.
Okay,
The-
so,
That's good.
so,
Next,
would you want to consider, at this point in time, consideration of the minutes for December 20th, January 17th, and the February 21st and March 6th meetings? We have not approved minutes for a while.
Do we have them?
Yeah, she's.
yeah,
She sent them out.
Yeah.
So long.
I move that they be approved as distributed.
I'll
Yeah.
second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, the minutes, as indicated, are approved and
Mike.
will be appropriately documented
This
in
is his
the
last meeting.
Harpswell archives forever.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Oh my gosh.
I just looked at my calendar about what the date for the site walk would be.
Yes.
The site walk would be on Monday, the 8th.
Right.
Monday on the 8th is
solar
the
eclipse.
day of totality
I'm gonna be
I
up
will
in
not be
Holton,
here.
so I
of
can't
the
make it.
solar eclipse.
Supposed to have 90%
And
chance
there are
of
two
being on, but I
factors
scouted the
involved
roads
with
and
holding site walks.
Yeah, that will not
In
work.
that the period of semi-eclipse here will be about 3 o'clock or
Yeah.
3:15 in the afternoon.
I will
And
be-
there may be people who have alternative plans for where they're going to be
Yeah,
at
that's a
3 o'clock.
guarantee.
Yeah.
Shoot. Shoot.
So,
Moosehead
are there any
Lake.
suggestions about how we?
You want to move it to Tuesday?
Does that
Tuesday,
sound
the 9th?
Reasonable to everybody?
It's okay with me.
I have nothing on my calendar that I know of, so I could still do the 9th.
Okay. All
Let's
right.
do the 9th.
So,
What time they gonna start?
let's move the site walks from Monday, the 8th, Tuesday, the 9th.
Thank you, Mike.
Any, we need to vote on that? I think
We don't know.
Okay.
As I just said, we'll work backwards, so we end by 5, and, you
Hopefully, we
know,
won't have a lot of.
if we only have 2, we would
That's easy.
start about 3:30 or
Okay, I'll just-
thereabouts.
Approximately 3:30.
All right.
That's all I need to know.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Well,
Okay,
it
so
could
we've
be,
had a
it could be
fulsome-
earlier if we get a
Yeah.
third or a fourth.
Right.
We've had a full meeting, a great discussion, and
Should've had it at
as
5.
usual,
Couldn't be here for
there are
five.
wonderful, complicated issues that the town has to face in the future, but with the talent that we have, we're gonna make it happen. Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, can I just make an observation? And this is by no means to demean Amy, but Amy is a retired professional planner. And if she doesn't understand what the intention is of the description of the lot size requirements in the various proposed zones, that suggests to me that that should be a big red star that says those need to be clarified and rewritten if they're going to go forward the way they are.
Yeah. And
Because
I think we may get feedback to that extent in the next several days.
Yeah, I understand, but I'm just saying Amy's a good barometer
Yeah,
for
I
that.
agree with that completely.
Because-
I did bring that up, I don't want to belabor it, but
Right.
I did ask for
I don't know.
plan view
so,
drawings that would
maybe.
really explain and show to the average person, and,
I guess so. I'm not
you know,
sure.
the consultant said that wasn't her job. So, I think we really need to have visuals. It's so important. This
Well,
is
there was a
complicated
visual
stuff.
that you folks brought to the
Yeah,
town
that was
meeting.
kind of so that people could see the types of, we can't tell the developer, here are your buildings. It was just kind of an idea
But-
of main.
Yeah. I mean, the Affordable Housing Working Group is working on that, except that everybody went on vacation for
Only a
March.
few of us are left.
But it isn't just the affordable housing stuff.
Oh, no,
It's-
I'm
it's
saying
the
that's
whole
all-
thing.
That's all we can deal with.
Yeah.
The task force has to deal with, you know, the issue of the comprehensive plan and what we can do. If you think you need to do other things and need other services.
Tomorrow's
know.
Thursday, we have a meeting at Cundy's Harbor at 4 o'clock, 4 to 6, and I'm going to meet with the Harpswell Business Association at Cook's, of all places.
Wow.
Nice.
I don't know how that's going to be set up, but I'll be talking about the comp plan there.
And you can't
someone
have
shows
your
up.
double malt scotch until after you talk to them.
No, not necessarily. You know, I'm
I-
trying to figure that out.
Yeah, at the risk of being, you know, too vocal, I just can't let this meeting go. I did not realize in my mind this was going to be your last meeting. And
Good.
it is, I am embarrassed, I have to say. You have given so much of your time. You have been such an exemplary chair. You've been fair, you've been open, you've really weighed stuff really well, you've been transparent, you've been a true leader for this board, and I'm kind of like, I'm going to really miss you, not just because of your ability as chair, but also as a person. And I'm embarrassed that I didn't realize that and bring you your scotch to this meeting.
Maybe you'll have a drop-in.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, I've been on the board for almost 10 years.
Oh, really?
9.5 years, maybe. And the chair for the bulk of that time, because literally a year after I got on the board, Dave Shipman was elected selectman.
Right.
And he was the chair of the board, and for some reason, I was
You didn't
dubbed.
duck fast enough.
And so I would say it's been an unbelievable experience for me. I've learned a lot about the town. I've learned about the complexities of a lot of different things, and I'm leaving reluctantly, but I'm leaving for personal reasons, a lot of them health-related reasons, and just realizing that there comes a time when everybody has to say things are more important. And so I thank you. It's been a pleasure, and I'm glad that I can contribute to the town, have contributed, hopefully, in a small amount. And I'm not going to be a stranger. I'll poke my nose in every once in a while
I'd love to see you.
and keep involved.
We expect it, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I don't think the average person really realizes, and even some of the town leaders really realize how much work goes into this job. And,
Oh, yeah.
and how important it is to really keeping Harpswell.
Yeah.
It's, we really, this board is on the front lines of
Yes,
a lot of
yeah,
stuff.
You're right.
And
And that's why I'm turning it over to you, at least
I'm going, we got a lot of great
temporarily,
people on this
at
board.
least, and I'm sure that there's a lot of talent here, and we're
A lot
gonna,
of talent.
And Mr. Chairman, speaking of that, did you sign all the NODs today?
yes, I did.
Okay, thank you.
All right,
Thank you very much.
thank you. We're gonna lose our
Meeting's
planner.
adjourned.
All right.
We're gonna- It's gonna